Oh, I was so jealous. I was jealous of the Beatles. I couldn't believe how jealous I was of the Beatles.
The Beach Boys' Brian Wilson, musical genius or petty rival. Behind those perfect harmonies and that sunny California sound lay a web of bitter feuds, crushing jealousy and backstabbing that would make a soap opera writer blush. You think you know Brian Wilson, the sweet, innocent mastermind behind Pet Sounds? Think again. This legendary producer and songwriter harbored some serious grudges against fellow musicians. And today, we're counting down the top 6 artists who made his blood absolutely boil. From production rivals who stole his thunder to Beatles who dismissed his genius, from rock legends who snubbed him at industry parties to the ultimate betrayal that came from within his own family, we're exposing the dark side of one of music's most celebrated figures. But here's the kicker. The musician Brian Wilson hated most wasn't some chart rival or British invasion competitor. No, the person who earned his deepest resentment was someone much closer to home, someone who should have had his back but instead stabbed him right in it. Stick around because number 1 is going to shock you. Trust me, you won't see this coming. 6. Phil Spector. Coming in at number 6 is the legendary Phil Spector, and this feud was all about ego, innovation, and who really invented the modern pop sound. Picture this. 2 musical geniuses, both revolutionizing how records were made, but with completely opposite philosophies. Spector had his famous wall of sound, layers upon layers of instruments creating this massive cathedral-like sonic experience. Meanwhile, Wilson was crafting his own intricate productions, but with a more delicate, almost orchestral approach. The tension allegedly started when Wilson became obsessed with outdoing Spector's groundbreaking work. Sources close to the Beach Boys claim Wilson would spend hours dissecting Spector's recordings, muttering things like, "all gimmick, no soul," while frantically scribbling notes about arrangements and mic placement. But here's where it gets juicy. Wilson reportedly felt that Spector was getting all the credit for innovations that he believed he had pioneered first. The breaking point supposedly came during the Pet Sounds sessions when Wilson was quoted as saying Spector's productions were just noise with a melody thrown on top. Industry insiders remember the cold shoulder these two gave each other at LA recording studios. They'd book sessions at the same facilities but never acknowledged each other's presence. It was like watching 2 chess masters refuse to play the same game. The irony? Both men were actually quite similar. Perfectionist producers who tortured musicians with endless takes, both struggling with mental health issues, both desperate for recognition as serious artists rather than just hitmakers. At number 5, we have John Lennon, and this rivalry cuts straight to the heart of Brian Wilson's deepest insecurities about his place in music history. The alleged feud started with what Wilson perceived as a devastating snub from the Beatles' most outspoken member. According to music industry gossip, Lennon once dismissed the harmonic complexity of "Wouldn't It Be Nice," calling it pretty but pointless, during a private conversation at a Hollywood party in 1966. Wilson, who had poured his soul into crafting those intricate vocal arrangements, was reportedly crushed. Sources close to the Beach Boys claim he spent weeks obsessing over Lennon's comment, playing Beatles records backward and forward, trying to prove their harmonies were simpler than his own. But the real knife twist came during the Sgt. Pepper's versus Pet Sounds debate. While Paul McCartney publicly praised Pet Sounds, Lennon remained notably silent. Wilson allegedly interpreted this silence as confirmation that the smart Beatle thought his work was inferior. The tension escalated when Lennon was quoted in a British music magazine saying American bands were trying too hard to be sophisticated, a comment Wilson's inner circle believed was aimed directly at him. Wilson's response was reportedly brutal, telling friends that Lennon was all attitude, no musical education. What made this feud particularly painful for Wilson was the respect factor. He desperately wanted validation from his peers, especially the Beatles, and Lennon's apparent dismissal felt like a rejection from the cool kids table he'd never be invited to join. Number 4 brings us to Mick Jagger, and this rivalry was pure cultural warfare. Clean-cut California versus rebellious rock and roll attitude. The bad blood allegedly started at a 1965 music industry showcase where both the Beach Boys and Rolling Stones were performing. According to backstage witnesses, Jagger supposedly looked Wilson up and down and made a comment about surf boys playing dress-up, referring to Wilson's preppy stage outfit. Wilson, who was already sensitive about the Beach Boys' wholesome image compared to the Stones' dangerous reputation, reportedly fired back that Jagger was manufactured rebellion for suburban kids who want to feel edgy. Ouch. But the real tension went deeper than just image. Wilson allegedly resented how the Stones could get away with sloppy musicianship, while his meticulously crafted arrangements were dismissed as too safe. Industry insiders claim he once said Jagger couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but gets praised for being authentic. The competitive fire burned hottest during the mid-60s when both bands were fighting for chart positions. Wilson was supposedly obsessed with the Stones' success, particularly frustrated that their raw sound was being hailed as more real than the Beach Boys' sophisticated productions. The most revealing alleged quote came from a studio session where Wilson was struggling with a particularly difficult vocal arrangement. A frustrated Wilson supposedly snapped, "Mick Jagger never has to worry about hitting the right notes. He just sneers and calls it art." This feud represented everything Wilson felt was wrong with rock criticism: style over substance, attitude over ability. 3. Frank Zappa. Coming in at number 3 is Frank Zappa, and this intellectual rivalry was a battle between two California innovators who couldn't have been more different in their approach to pushing musical boundaries. The tension between Wilson and Zappa was rooted in a fundamental philosophical disagreement about what music should accomplish. Zappa, the experimental maverick, allegedly viewed the Beach Boys as musical McDonald's, mass-produced entertainment disguised as art. Wilson, meanwhile, reportedly saw Zappa as a pretentious show-off who confused complexity with quality. The feud reached its peak during the late 60s LA recording scene when both were working at the same studios. Studio engineers reported an atmosphere of barely concealed contempt whenever their sessions overlapped. Zappa would allegedly make snide comments about commercial sellouts, while Wilson would mutter about avant-garde nonsense. The breaking point supposedly came when Zappa publicly criticized Pet Sounds in an interview, calling it sophisticated bubble gum for adults who think they have good taste. Wilson's response was reportedly swift and brutal. He told friends that Zappa was so busy trying to prove he's smarter than everyone else, he forgot music is supposed to move people. What made this rivalry particularly bitter was their shared reputation as innovators. Both were experimenting with studio techniques. Both were pushing against conventional song structures, but their methods were completely opposite. Wilson wanted to perfect pop music. Zappa wanted to destroy it. Industry insiders claim Wilson was genuinely hurt by Zappa's dismissal because he respected the man's technical abilities, even if he hated his attitude. This wasn't just professional competition. It was a rejection of Wilson's entire artistic philosophy. At number 2, we have Paul McCartney, and this rivalry was the most devastating because it was built on respect that somehow turned toxic. Here's the thing that made Wilson's relationship with McCartney so complicated. Paul actually praised Pet Sounds publicly, calling it his favorite album and crediting it as inspiration for Sgt. Pepper's. But according to Wilson's inner circle, that praise felt like a backhanded compliment that haunted him for decades. Wilson allegedly became obsessed with the idea that McCartney was patronizing him, praising Pet Sounds while simultaneously proving the Beatles could do it better with Sgt. Pepper's. Sources close to the Beach Boys claim Wilson would play both albums back-to-back, frantically taking notes and muttering things like, "He's showing me how it should have been done." The competition became so intense that it allegedly derailed Wilson's follow-up masterpiece, Smile. Studio musicians reported Wilson becoming increasingly paranoid about Beatles releases, convinced that every new Beatles song was designed to show up his work. He was quoted as saying McCartney was killing me with kindness while stealing my ideas. But here's where it gets really dark. Wilson reportedly told his therapist that McCartney's public praise was worse than outright criticism, because it trapped him in a cage of being almost as good as the Beatles. He felt like he was forever destined to be the opening act to their headlining show. The psychological toll was enormous. Wilson's pursuit of matching Sgt. Pepper's supposedly contributed to his mental health struggles during the late 60s. He was chasing an impossible standard set by someone who claimed to admire him. 1. Mike Love. But the musician Brian Wilson hated most wasn't a rival from another band. It was his own cousin and Beach Boys bandmate, Mike Love. This is the betrayal that cut deepest because it came from family. While Wilson was trying to evolve the Beach Boys' sound into something more sophisticated and artistic, Love was allegedly fighting him every step of the way, dismissing his experimental work as Brian's ego trip. The most damaging conflict centered around the legendary Lost album Smile. Wilson had crafted what many consider his masterpiece, a complex, avant-garde suite that would have revolutionized popular music. But Love allegedly sabotaged the entire project, calling it unreleasable garbage and threatening to quit if Wilson didn't return to simple surf songs. Industry insiders claim Love's opposition wasn't just creative, it was personal. He reportedly resented Wilson's growing reputation as the band's genius, feeling like he was being reduced to just another hired voice. Sources say Love would mock Wilson's mental health struggles, calling his innovative ideas crazy talk from a crazy person. The ultimate betrayal came with publishing rights and songwriting credits. While Wilson was creating the music that made the Beach Boys legendary, Love was allegedly working behind the scenes to diminish his cousin's financial stake in their success. Legal battles over credits and royalties poisoned their relationship for decades. So there you have it. Brian Wilson's genius came with bitter rivalries and family betrayal. Which feud shocked you most? Smash that like button, subscribe for more music drama, and tell us in the comments who you think hurt Wilson's career the most.